Welcome to Congregation Nishmat Am. My name is Rabbi David Barnett. I'm honored to be the rabbi of Congregation Nishmat Am here. And sitting to my left is Dr. David Patterson, our esteemed and beloved Dr. David Patterson. This evening's words are meaning, truth, and goodness. At this time, it's my great honor and pleasure to present to you Dr. David Patterson, who will begin his presentation for this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Welcome to everyone. Welcome especially to my students. An ethical will is a tradition in Judaism and among the Jewish people. It goes back to the patriarchs when Jacob gathered his sons around him to offer them whatever understanding, wisdom he may have acquired. So this is something, unlike my other books, or at least most of them, that I've written for my children, my grandchildren, my family, my friends, my community. I count my students here among my children. So this is also part of my inheritance for them as well. The 18 words comes from the Hebrew word life, chai, which is on the cover of the book. It's a chet yud, 2 letters. A chet has a value of 8. The yud has a value of 10. Each Hebrew letter has a numerical value. And where, books often on the back cover somewhere or inside cover will have a photo of the author, this is really a photo of the audience. It's me holding my youngest grandchild, Julia. So this is one day, she's 2.5. One day, perhaps you'll be able to read this book. The first word I want to talk about tonight is the word meaning. And I have some thoughts that I've taken out of the book just to give you an idea of what's in the book. We live in a time, it seems to me, as other times in history, we live in a time of a certain hunger. And not just a hunger of bread, but a hunger within the soul, a hunger for meaning, seems to me. The soul needs meaning as the body needs bread. Without meaning, the soul suffocates. And I've described this time as a meaning famine. And I know most of you have sensed this. Something's out of whack. Something's wrong. The soul is starving for something to sustain it. Now, the Hebrew word for meaning, and I use Hebrew words a lot in this book of 18 words. The Hebrew word for meaning is mashma'ut. Mashma'ut is meaning, sense, significance. Comes as the root shama, which is to hear. To have a sense of meaning is to have a sense of hearing something. We don't discover meaning. Meaning discovers us and calls us out, summons us, commands us. My colleagues in academia like to talk about making meaning. We have all of this chaotic data out there. We take it in and we make meaning. And I once asked one of my colleagues, does it matter what meaning we make? If it matters, then we don't make meaning. Meaning makes us, so to say. Meaning seeks us out. To live as a human being is not so much a matter of speculation or introspection even, or getting in touch with your feelings. It's a matter of hearing and responding, hearing a call, someone who calls out to us, who asks us the question put to the first human, where are you? Where are you? And it's someone who asks. It's not something. It's not the ego who asks. The ego is an illusion. A famous modern Jewish thinker named Abraham Joshua Heschel says that the self is a self-delusion. It's someone who asks, and it's someone who is asking us at every instant, not just where are you, but who are you? Who are you? He's asking us something about a relationship. She wants to have a word with us. Come, I need to have a word with you. What have you done with my word, with my words? That's, where are you? Where are you? Where's your brother? What have you done? The two questions put to the firstborn of the first human. There's a tradition in Judaism that says when we die and lie in the grave, the angel of death comes to us to take us into the presence of the Holy One. It's the same question for each of us, but the answer is different in each case. And the question is the question that the angel put to Jacob. What is your name? Now, before you think, I don't have to worry about that, I know my name perfectly. What do we know when we know our name? We know something about the names of those who have left us their inheritance, who have entrusted us with a teaching and a tradition, who named us. Those who bled for us and sweated for us, stayed up at night for us. We're all Private Ryan, as I sometimes explain to my students, the young man for whom several died so that he might live. And if you've seen the film, there's this powerful scene at the end where the aging Private Ryan is in the cemetery in Normandy. And he turns to his family, his adult children, and with this pleading in his voice, he asks, have I been a good man? To have meaning is to have goodness. And we'll talk about goodness shortly. To have a sense of meaning is to know our name. It's to know how to answer to our name when meaning calls. Meaning as a who and not a concept or what. Calls us into a relationship. It can take a lifetime to learn our name. To learn how to answer. Here I am for you. As soon, in that opening, in that hineni, as we say in Hebrew, hineni, here I am for you. When God summons the patriarchs and the prophets, they don't answer huh or what. They answer hineni. Here I am for you. That creates an opening through which meaning can enter. Through which meaning can enter. Those are my thoughts for the moment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patterson. So insightful and so special. And indeed, pun intended, so full of meaning. Viktor Frankl, who you have referred to at various parts in our discussion and in your book itself, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in the most difficult situations of the concentration camps, the horrors, seeing hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands pass away, he was determined to survive. And the meaning that he derived from that he felt from deep within his presence, is that he wanted to be able to be a witness so that the events that happened would not utterly go into oblivion, and that there would be a living testimony to that. Something concrete in his own personage and from within the depths of his own being. There is a wonderful section here on in pages 41 and 42 of your book that you alluded to this evening, when you say that the Hebrew word for meaning is mashma'ut, but it comes from the root shema, to hear. And I had never thought about it in these terms. And this inspired me to create a whole mini theory about the Hebrew language. And I know we have some people in our audience, our studio audience here, who have studied the Hebrew language in great detail for many years. I can assure you that you've never heard this idea before exactly, because I think I am sharing it perhaps for the first time in history. I will be very interested to know the response to this idea. It seems to me that, of course, many times it's known that we have roots in Hebrew. Most of them are from 3-letter roots. Sometimes there are 2-letter roots. And then the noun form that gives us an extension from that root often is preceded by a mem. And I here this evening am going to call this a mem of actualization. And I'm going to give several examples from Hebrew, and then I'm going to come back to your derivation here of the word mashma'ut, of meaning, and tie it in with your key concept of response. So, for example, the idea here is that this mem comes in as an addition, a construct, as a derivation from source. And the source is that essence of the root of an idea. And then with the mem in front of it, it becomes energy with direction, sometimes often something that you can see and feel and touch, and becomes the connection between the divine and the human as we experience it. So, for example, food is the word for le'echol is the verb from achal, aleph, chaf, lamed. So a little snack, something you eat, is ma'achal. Now, to rule is lim shol, from the root mashal. What is the word for government? Memshala. Or memshala, you also have an adjective form, memshelet. Again, the mem in front of it in both cases. What about a different word that we spoke about here in our synagogue several weeks ago? The root shachen, to dwell. So what do we call the dwelling place, the indwelling place in a physical, concrete sense for God's presence during the wanderings of the desert? It was the Mishkan. And then a very powerful word, to uproot, to turn over, lafoch. If you take that to an ultimate step in human political direction, you can call it a mapecha, a revolution. So the mem then takes the initial divine inspiration, fills it with an energy for direction and actualization. And that leads us, hopefully, to make that connection from the divine in a state of flow as water flowing to the state of flow of our interior beings. So the Shema is something that we hear and perceive on a very, very deep level, something that's imparted to us and becomes then imbued, hopefully, within us. And as that becomes imbued within us, we gain that sense of mashma'ut. And by gaining that sense, by becoming transformed in the process, then we enter into our mode of entering in relationship and in communication with other people, which is the ultimate source of meaning in our human interactions, the mode of hearing and responding. So I wanted to share that aspect with you.
That was beautiful. It's interesting that you mentioned water flowing. Mem is mime. Mem is water. Mem with a value of 40 is also associated with Torah, 40 days of revelation, which is about actualizing, enacting, hearing, heeding, doing. Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do it and we will hear it. So you have I think you have your intuition is very, very sharp here.
Thank you so much.
Shall we talk about truth?
Yes, let's go on to the next. This is big. Wow, truth. How can you have life without truth?
Well,
To have real truth, to real life, authentic life, you can't have it without truth. Dr. Patterson, now on truth.
truth. Yes, you can't have life without truth because there's no relationship without truth. Truth is between two. Just as a lie, and I'm turning to some of my text here, just as the lie is rooted in an isolation within a fearful and power-hungry ego, so the truth is rooted in a movement into a relationship with another, which can be equally fearsome because we have to let go of the ego, the last thing we're willing to give up very often. We have to release our grip on our handrails to move into the truth and to become truthful, full of truth. The truth is scary. One of the things that lies promise us is security, a firm ground under our feet. But we all know they're illusions. They're illusions. The lie feeds on our longing for a guarantee. It's the serpent. You will be like God, knowing, not knowing the difference between good and evil, but knowing and determining good and evil. You'll be safe. You'll be safe. And it's very attractive. It's pleasing to the eye, right? It's seductive. The lie is seductive. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such a problem. The truth, on the other hand, turns us over to a shifting ground. As soon as we think we have it in hand, it withers. The truth can't be seized. The truth seizes me. The truth seizes me. The opposite of the truth is not perhaps a lie exactly. It's the fixed formula and ready answer that we pull out like a security blanket. The truth turns us over to a vulnerability and a responsibility to and for the other human being. There's no glimpsing the truth without being implicated by the truth. And it's a responsibility for God himself. God himself is imperiled by this tension between truth and lie. God himself. God himself. There's an old film whose plot I don't remember. I just remember one line in the film. It's about this, crusty old detective. I think it's played by George C. Scott. And someone asked him, what is truth? And he said, I don't know. But when I'm hugging my son, I have an idea. I catch a glimpse of the truth. So the truth is not a fact or a datum. It's a living presence that unfolds in a loving embrace. There's no movement toward the truth without love for another. Love is the truth. One way to think of this. This is why we have someone like Charlotte Delbo, Holocaust survivor, who in the opening page of her memoir called None of Us Will Return, she says, I'm not sure everything here is true, but it's all truthful. By that, she meant, I'm not sure I have all of the facts exactly straight, but she's speaking the truth. She's speaking in response to the dead for the sake of the living. She's speaking the truth as something precious that's been entrusted to her care. that's been entrusted to her care. She knows what matters. That's it. To know the truth is to know what matters. It's to know what must be said and to speak what was done. As we're called before the one who neither sleeps nor slumbers. The one who asks us our name is asking us, do you know the truth? Do you know the truth? Those are some thoughts about the truth. One last thought, emet. I have to say the Hebrew word.
Wait.
Aleph, Mem, Tav. Aleph is the first letter, Mem the middle letter, Tav is the last letter. So our sages teach us that the truth encompasses everything. The first, the middle, and the last. The truth decides everything. Decides everything. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I think the first response that I would like to share is that ultimate truth must rely with God, because truth is much more than a collection of facts or information. It's the total perspective on all of reality and all that is good and all that is of true essence. And so that is the essence and the center of truth. We aspire to reach that. And so I would like to, I noted a few other very important sections from this section in your book that I'd like to quote. And that is on page 53. And I mentioned the pages so that our reading audience will be able to refer to the actual text. Dr. Patterson says, and yet the truth abides in the search for the truth. The truth is by its nature forever sought and never found. Indeed, just like God, we can never say that we are God, God forbid, we would never say that we are God or that we have absolute certainty with respect to God. That is beyond the realm, the ken of human capacity. We search, we yearn, we aspire towards, we try and synchronize our own sense of being and vibration to that higher source. And therefore, and I'm very glad that I have several students from the class I've been teaching on Gateways to Judaism here with us this evening, because central to that, I think, is the role of humility. And so you don't find Jews cutting people's heads off in the name of our God. You just don't find it on the planet. It's just not done that. It's just not done. You don't find Jews killing other people to convert to Judaism. For us, we have our own set of truths that we perceive and that we hold as dear, but we don't say they are absolute to other people, even for a moment. On page 54, you talked about hatred. And I think it's so important for the sake of our planet that this be mentioned. You said hatred is inextricably bound to the lie. And in many ways, you said the opposite of truth is not the lie, it is hatred. And I wrote and I made a note to myself that's like blinding the eye of justice, just as a bribe that said it in the line of our Torah can blind the eye towards justice. So hatred can blind the eye towards truth. And so therefore, on page 55, you say to seek truth, like seeking meaning, is to seek a capacity for hearing, not a capacity to believe, but a capacity to hear the outcry of our neighbor, of the stranger. And that's done again with humility, I would suggest. For to be deaf, and this is so profound what you add here at the end, for to be deaf to that outcry is to be deaf to the truth of the infinite dearness of that human being. And I think those words will remain for posterity as close to truth as we can come.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm glad you mentioned the line where I say that the truth is not found but sought. The truth is precisely what we seek after. and we continually move toward. The truth, as you say, is the truth of a relationship, not the truth of a creed. Not of a creed. Righteousness in Jewish tradition is viewed in terms of relationship, human to human relation, and not this creed or that. The righteous among the nations are those who have heard the outcry of another and answered the outcry in truth. The righteous among the nations are those who understand what truth is. And to live truthfully, to live truthfully is to help. If I suggest that the opposite of truth is not to lie, but hatred, this kind of brings me into our third word, goodness. Goodness is steeped in love, where love is not a fuzzy feeling. Love is itself a living presence between two. Feelings we have inside us, but love is between us and between one and another. When we are summoned to love our neighbor as ourselves, chapter 19 of Leviticus, the chapter that also commands us to love the stranger as ourselves. The one who doesn't look like us, think like us, who, God forbid, might even belong to a different political party. Okay. But the Hebrew phrasing, "V'ahavta l're'echa kamocha," you shall be loving toward your neighbor. Kamocha, because that is what you are like. And, Emmanuel Levinas, a philosopher my students have heard me invoke before, says the kamocha actually means that is who you are. Who you are in truth lies in that loving relationship, which is rooted not in feeling something toward another, but treating another in a certain manner, especially when you don't feel like it. That's where goodness happens. That's where goodness, steeped in love, draws its breath. Now, the first appearance of the word good in the Torah, in the Bible, is when God pronounces the light to be good. Kitov. The light that is created upon the first utterance of God, before the luminaries of the heavens. Okay? Now you can imagine, or perhaps you can imagine, the commentaries upon commentaries about this. Let there be light. It's the light, I would suggest, among other sages who have suggested it's the light of goodness itself. God saw the light and he saw good. And it's the light that's created in an act of love on the part of the creator, in a movement into the relation, a relation that can never be close enough, a relation that is always sought. As one of my favorite thinkers, I mentioned Levinas, says, the caress is eternally seeking to offer more, offer more. To be good is to be giving. I note another passage from the Torah in the book where it's written in Deuteronomy, "I've set before you this day life and good, and death and evil. Therefore choose life that you may live, you and your seed." And I suggest to my heirs that if you're choosing life, you have to choose to be good. Choose goodness. Choose to live that you may love and be good. There's no loving relation and no being good in isolation. Goodness belongs to a relationship, to a movement toward another. You can't sit alone in your room and be good. I suppose you can behave, but there's a difference between behaving and being good. Goodness is relational. Goodness is, may I help you? Goodness is saying, after you. It's as simple and as common as that. You know, the philosophers like to talk about the problem of evil, unexplained evil. If God is powerful and good, how can we explain evil? I think there's, from a philosophical standpoint, there's a problem of goodness, inexplicable goodness. I see it all the time. It's mind-blowing. I've seen it in just about everyone here personally. We don't choose we choose between good and evil, but we don't choose the good. We don't decide what's good. The good chooses us. And that's why it matters whether we choose good or evil. The good chooses us before we've had time to raise our eyes. It takes hold of us and asks us, as God asks Cain, where's your brother and what have you done? What are you going to do about it? Let me just have just one other brief comment here. You know, in the Torah, it's written that man lives not by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. One of the great sages of modern times, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, has a slightly different take on what this means. According to Rabbi Steinsaltz, with whom I had the great blessing of studying for a time, it means this is not to be taken that, you know, we have a physical and a spiritual aspect and each one is different, you know, live not by bread alone, but by every word of God. No, Rabbi Steinsaltz says, man does not live only from the calories provided by the bread, but from the divine energy. This is what the Torah calls utterance from the mouth of the Lord. It makes the bread live and forms its true essence. In other words, although superficially I'm only eating matter, in fact, I'm ingesting language because the raw material of bread is the divine word. The divine word, the first word uttered at creation, let there be light, is the word of goodness. So when we eat bread at a meal, it's incumbent upon us to recite the blessing after the meals when we eat bread, which opens with an invocation of the goodness of God, the goodness that abides within the bread itself. And here, this is why many, many traditions, perhaps most, I'm sure most traditions, pray when they eat. People pray when they eat. When we put a piece of bread in our mouth, in that moment, a transformation as mystical as it is mundane starts to take place. The bread itself is already in our hands as a result of some transformations. You know, wheat, dirt, water, light get turned into wheat. Wheat gets turned into bread. When I was a kid, it just blew my mind that bread, you know, who invented bread? Where did this come? But when we place the bread in our mouth, the bread that harbors a spark of the divine, of the God who is the good, as we call him, Ha'el HaTov. We pray that God may help us transform the bread created through his word of goodness into our own acts of goodness and loving kindness. Something that starts as bread ends up as an embrace and a rejoicing. Of course, it can end up other ways too. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. It's perhaps not without coincidence that in English, the word good is just one letter extra with an extra O from God. And indeed, in some ways, in so many ways, it would be inconceivable to for us as human beings to think of God as being anything other than largely good. However, we also do say that God created evil. We don't have a dualism where we have one God that represents good and one God that represents evil. That was Zoroastrianism, originally from Persia, many millennia ago. So how do we reconcile that then in our choices? Just, I think, really in the verse that actually Dr. Patterson just quoted. You could look at that that verse that he quoted, that he has set before us these choices, life and good, and also death and evil, and choose life, which will for us will represent the good, to choose goodness. So why is that important? Because as human beings, we are not only bound by instincts, but indeed we have free choice. That is how God created us, for better, or so often as it has been throughout history, perhaps for worse. We in the Jewish tradition strive as the whole essence of the tradition to help point us towards that good. And in so doing so, we praise God even for that capacity, which will set the tone for the next coming words coming up. Tov lo, which you quote on page 63. It is in fact good. Using that word we studied this time, leodot, to give thanks, which is an expression of gratitude. And these things are connected, as so often you point out in your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Yes, Tov leodot. It is good to give thanks. The opening line in Psalm 92.
Yeah.
There's no goodness without gratitude, no gratitude without goodness. And gratitude will be one of the words we talk about in the future. Should we
yes, let's
take
see
some
if we have any
questions?
questions. First of all, ask if there are any questions that are being collected or have been collected from our group here that's present. And then we'll go on to any that may come from the Zoom group. Whichever set of questions here will come to our podium first. We will definitely entertain that. And just looking ahead, indeed, the word gratitude will appear after the word love. So gratitude is an expression for God's love and his goodness. They're all connected. And that's what, one of the ideas that I did say in my class today, that I think our tradition consists of these interrelated concepts that are all complementary to each other. Thank you so much. And you'd have a distortion if you took one to its absurdity. But when they're in dynamic tension with each other, they're balanced. And I think that's the genius of our tradition. And it goes, I want to say, as I'm looking at different people in our congregation here in our studio audience, it goes far beyond simplistic definitions, Democrat, Republican, these kinds of things get obliterated in the larger discussions. So I will read the first one that came up here. It says, your truth might not be someone else's truth. How do you know? Let's just say, how do we know what is truth?
That's true. Each of us has our understanding of the truth, but both of us can be wrong because there is a truth to be understood, to be sought, a truth that continually seeks me and seeks us. To seek the truth is to listen to others. We're taught that the Torah, which is truth, right, has 70 faces or facets like a diamond. And each of the 70 facets of the Torah corresponds to, one of the 70 nations, of the world. So we have a teaching that says if you want to know the truth of Torah, you have to listen to these other perspectives. Okay? As I said, once you think you got it, it slips right through your fingers, which takes you back to listening to another. A sense of, I talked about, the sense of hearing connected to meaning. There's also a capacity for listening that's connected to truth.
Thank you so much. And here's an excellent question. In the age of misinformation and disinformation, how do we ensure that the truth breaks through the barriers?
Yes. Well, if there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation, that means there is some information somewhere that is solid, that is what true, so to say. But information is not the same as truth, even correct information. As I said, the truth is not a datum. The truth comes to bear when we act on what we think we know, to the extent that it adds depth to our embrace. It's in the moment of embrace that the truth opens. It's in the moment it's in the movement toward another that the truth, takes on life. I had a talk with some of my students the other day in class about education. What is it? Is it acquiring information, skills, knowledge? Is that it? Power? I sometimes say, it's often sold as gaining the knowledge to plunder the world of its goods. That's not education, at least in Hebrew, chinuch. Chinuch is education, dedication as in dedicating the temple, Hanukkah, and sanctification of a home. The Beit Knesset, place of worship, Beit Sefer, school, and a bite, the home. If education entails seeking truth, it entails sifting through the chaos of media of all sorts to take on a greater capacity for sanctifying creation, elevating creation through something as simple as a kind word. I spoke last time about the power of words, the power of kindness. The power of kindness is the power of truth, I would say.
Thank you so much. Now, this next one is a question that's excellent in and of itself, and yet will lead us to an amazing question following it. So this is on truth. It was mentioned that for the Jews, it was mentioned that truth for the Jews is not absolute truth for others. And then the follow-through question on that, are God's words and commandments then absolute for humanity and eternity?
Yes, I'm reminded of another statement by Abraham Joshua Heschel, who once said that we may not know, the mystery of God, the infinity and the eternity of God, but we know very well what God wants from us. It's very clear. Don't murder, don't lie, don't steal, don't torture, etc. That's literal. God, people ask me, do you take the Torah literally or figuratively? And I say, yes. God literally does not want us to murder. Okay. So that is an absolute it's a commandment that comes from the one who is the absolute. Now, those of us who have spent some time studying Torah and Talmud know that the discussions, the disputes are all over the place. They're myriad because only God has the truth in hand. Some say Elijah also has the truth. But we are always arguing over it, disputing it. Look, you can never approach the truth without argument. Argument in good faith. Argument out of love for one another. Um, the time to get nervous over whether I know the truth is when everyone agrees with me. Because there is an absolute that is forever yet to be attained, yet to be realized. It's a closeness that I seek that can never be close enough. You see.
And if I may qualify again, the remark that might have precipitated the first part of the question, when I said that our truth is that we seek truth, we don't proclaim our truth to be absolute, absolutely found, absolutely certain, 100% certain, that we have that degree of humility, and it's that degree of humility that will prevent us from murdering others unnecessarily, and literally from staging a stage presentation, literally to cut off the neck of someone who disagree with us on theological basis, basis as we've seen.
Thank you.
And so we have this follow through question that I know really echoes a hurting, a crying out in the heart that so many people now feel, both in the Jewish community and the world at large. And perhaps for some, it's that we, in the Jewish community, I'm going to preface this by saying that maybe education is part of the solution. So here is the question. And there is no one, this is a heavy duty question. There's no one more qualified to answer it than you. How do we apply these principles of truth, meaning, and goodness, of loving the stranger, and even helping our enemy in the current situation and relationship between Israel and Hamas, between us individually and those accusing us of committing genocide?
The accusation of genocide is not based on anything observed or demonstrable, or it's not based on evidence. It's calculated to incite hatred. The Israelis have been accused of genocide for decades, an ongoing genocide, 70-year, 75-year-long genocide. And of course, I have read statements from the West Bank, and Hamas has a very strong presence in the West Bank, that the Israelis are actually the ones who killed their own babies and raped their own women and their own elders, so they would have an excuse to commit genocide. Okay. One way to help someone who's trying to kill you is to prevent him or her from killing you. And unfortunately, that can mean killing the one who's trying to kill you. The Talmud requires us to take the life of someone who is bent on committing murder if that's the only way you can stop it. If that's the only way you can stop it. Okay. So I mean, those of you who have children know that you're not being kind to your child by letting your child walk all over you or be disrespectful to you or hit you. I had a talk with another student earlier today about war. Is war ever good? And my view is that war is never good, but sometimes it's necessary. War is not something that in Jewish tradition we glorify or celebrate. When the Egyptians were being drowned in the sea that closed in over them, and the angels started singing God's praise, God silenced the angels, saying, "How can you sing when my children are dying?" Golda Meir's famous remark, or at least attributed to her, after the October War, 1973, Yom Kippur War, "We can forgive you for attacking us. We can even forgive you for killing our children." but we will never forgive you for making our children kill your children. It's a matter of shame. Perhaps even greater than the horror of an unnecessary war is the horror of a necessary war. It's not always clear to determine, is this necessary or not? That's often ambiguous. But I would say in this case, in the current war in Gaza, when the enemy is a self-proclaimed murderer who tells you, I'm going to do it again and again and again and again, that has to be taken seriously and it has to be prevented, seems to me. It's because there is such a thing as holiness, as an absolute goodness, that war can't be good. It's not good. This is lo tov. Not good, but God help us. God forgive us. There are times when it's the only way to prevent even more killing, more torture, more rape, more burning alive, more dismembering, and et cetera, which is the stated intention of the one that the Israelis are currently at war with. The stated intention. Okay? They don't hide it. It's something we should weep over having to do, but certainly not glorify it. There's no cry of God is great on the part of the Israelis.
That was so profound and so important. And I affirm will be a very, very important response, a historical moment for this course as it will be placed in front of the entire world. And I'd like to add one small dimension of that, if I may, in perspective of from millennia back in our tradition. Back 2,000 years ago and before, when war was determined to be a situation of necessity, where war was engaged in, and even when it wasn't of necessity, absolute necessity, but nonetheless took place, upon returning from war, what were the Israelites in the days of the sanctuary of the temple commanded to do? They were commanded to bring a sin offering. And that sin offering was for things not that they had intentionally done, but often for the killing that they had unintentionally done. And now I ask, I plead for those in positions of power, seated at the United Nations, seated in The Hague, seated in other international venues of jurisdiction, to note for historical record what happened after October 7th, when so many Israelis were dismembered and killed. And I would like the historical record to note the glee and the joyfulness that was spread and filmed. And it wasn't a Hollywood studio coming and making those filmings. Men dancing around and celebrating the destruction that took place. And unfortunately, we have to even say, as I mentioned to my class today, the throngs of people, human beings in Amman, Jordan, who had a humongous rally with, it looked like people extended back for over a mile, yelling and identifying themselves with that same spirit, and decrying the West for not recognizing them, for upholding that same spirit as Hamas undertook in those evil acts. And that too should be noted as historically as an act of celebration as as opposed to the traditional Jewish mourning when human lives are taken, even in self-defense.
Yasha Koach.
Same to you. So we've had, are these all of the questions? We've had some here from our audience. Are there any more from the internet? Not at the moment. Do we have none at the moment from the chat room? Okay.
We're about at time.
So I think, yeah,
It's 8 o'clock.
yes, okay. So we'll conclude this now. And so as we concluded our previous session, first of all, we want to thank Dr. Patterson and our synagogue president, Jerry Patterson, and all of our donors, Reed and Karen Heller, Dr. David and Jerry Patterson, Bill McManaway, and Dr. Sheila Calderon, Michael Schiff, and acknowledge also the Ackerman Center at the University of Texas, Dallas, and the Dreamcast Productions. In particular, we would like to thank Emil Pina Nunes, who is our professional videographer for this. I want to thank our executive director, Stanley Siegel, and also our administrative director, also our office manager here, Danny, so much for helping us on this. Our next session then will be held on March 10th. And so the remaining 4 then after this, we had 2 out of the 6. So March 10th, March 17th, then we skip a week on the 24th, March 31st, and then on April 7th. So March 10th will be our next one.
That's 2 weeks.
Yes, yes. 2 weeks from now. And just want to thank all of you for tuning into this and for being part of this very, very important discussion and teaching. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Another one in the can. Yeah, that's